The auction hall was filled with voices, laughter, and the sound of chains. Merchants shouted prices, buyers leaned forward, and guards dragged the weak into the light. Among them was a young alien girl, small and thin, her wrists bruised from the iron cuffs. She kept her head down because she had been taught since birth that looking up brought punishment. The announcer raised his hand and forced her forward. "She is trained to serve," the man declared, his voice sharp like metal. "She cleans. She obeys. She stays silent. She will not speak unless commanded." The crowd chuckled, shaking their heads. "Too small," one voice laughed. "Not even worth the food she eats." Another voice shouted, "Give her away for free. She won't last a year." Each word made the girl's chest tighten, but she did not cry. She had long forgotten how. Her people had been broken for generations. They were raised not to hope, not to dream, but only to obey. She was no different, trained to kneel, trained to bow, trained to never question. In her mind, she thought only one thing: I was made to serve. That was all she knew, all she believed. The gavel was about to fall when the door creaked open. A human entered the room, late, quiet, different. The crowd turned to look, and whispers spread. Humans were rare here, strange and unpredictable. Some said they were weak, some said they were dangerous, but this one's eyes did not move like the others. He looked not at the crowd, not at the sellers, but only at her. The announcer grinned, thinking he had found a fool. "Ah, you there," he called to the human. "A perfect servant for you, cheap, obedient, silent." The human said nothing for a moment, his eyes steady. Then he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "How much?" The crowd laughed again. Why waste money on that one? She cannot even carry weight. She will break in a week. But the human did not argue. He paid the price without a word. The announcer smirked, happy to be rid of her. The chains were handed over, the girl trembling, sure this new master would be cruel. She followed him, steps small and careful. Her head remained bowed, her hands close to her chest. Inside, her thoughts were racing. Do not anger him. Do not fail him. Do not look up. Her heart pounded as she remembered the rules drilled into her since childhood. Obey quickly. Speak softly. Never rest. Never hope. Hope was the most dangerous thing of all. The human led her outside the auction hall, away from the noise. The air was cool, the sky wide, the stars bright. For the first time in her life, no walls surrounded her. But freedom meant nothing if she was still chained. She kept her eyes on the ground, waiting for his command. Would he demand silence, or work, or something worse? He stopped walking, turned to face her. The girl's knees bent by instinct, ready to kneel. But before she could, he reached down and touched the chains on her wrists. With one strong pull, he broke them apart, the iron falling to the ground. She gasped, her eyes wide, unable to believe. Her wrists were free, her skin raw but no longer bound. The human draped his cloak over her thin shoulders. "You will not need these anymore," he said softly. His voice was not sharp, not cruel, but gentle. She stared at him, confusion filling her chest. This was not what masters did. This was not what she was taught. Why free her? Why cover her? Why look at her as if she mattered? The girl trembled, waiting for the trick. But the human only said, "Come with me." And for the first time in her life, the sound of chains did not follow. The journey from the auction hall was silent. The alien girl followed behind the human, her steps light and careful. Her wrists still stung where the chains had been. But the cloak he gave her was warm. She clutched it tight, afraid he might take it back at any moment. In her mind, questions swirled like storms. Why did he free her? Why cover her with his cloak? Why buy her at all? She had been told many things about humans. Some said they were cruel, others said they were strange, but no one ever said a human would break chains without asking for anything. Still, she did not trust this. She could not, because trust was dangerous. He led her through narrow streets and into a quiet home built of stone and wood. The place smelled of fire and clean air, not smoke and rot like the slave quarters she knew. The human opened the door wider, motioning for her to step inside. Her body froze, her eyes staring at the floor, because servants never entered before their masters. But when he noticed her hesitation, he spoke softly. "It's safe. Come in." She obeyed, her bare feet brushing against smooth wooden boards. The room was warm, lit by a soft fire glowing in the corner. There was food on a table, clean water in a jug, and shelves filled with things she did not understand. Her eyes moved slowly, trying to memorize everything in case he tested her later. But then her gaze stopped on something that made her heart beat faster. A bed, not a pile of straw, not a corner of stone, but a real bed with soft blankets and a pillow. It looked too fine, too pure, and she dared not even breathe near it. Her knees bent by instinct, lowering herself to the ground, because that was where she belonged. Servants never touched beds. Beds were for masters only. The human set down a bag and looked at her. He frowned when he saw her kneeling, shaking on the cold floor. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice calm. "That bed is for you." She froze, her head snapping up in shock. "For me," she whispered, the words tasting strange on her tongue. He nodded, his expression steady. "Yes, it's yours now." Her chest tightened, fear twisting inside. This had to be a trick, some cruel game. She had been punished before for touching things that were not hers. She had been beaten for resting when she was supposed to serve, so she shook her head, whispering, "No, I will sleep here, on the ground." But the human walked closer, his shadow falling over her. Her body braced, expecting pain, expecting the strike. Instead, he reached down, lifted her small frame gently, and carried her to the bed. He placed her on the blankets as if she weighed nothing, as if she were fragile glass. The softness under her body felt unreal, dangerous, forbidden. She sat stiff, not daring to move, her eyes wide. The human pulled the blanket over her shoulders and stepped back. "You belong in a bed, not on the floor," he said simply. His voice carried no threat, no command, just truth. The girl's throat tightened, her heart racing, because no master had ever spoken like that. She wanted to believe him, but a voice inside screamed, "It's a lie, it must be." When he turned away to prepare food, she slowly slid off the bed and curled on the ground again. She could not allow herself to hope. Hope only brought pain. The human noticed when he returned, his eyes narrowing in confusion. "Why are you on the floor?" he asked. She lowered her head, whispering, "Because I was made to serve." The words hung heavy in the warm room. The human's expression darkened, his jaw tight, but his voice stayed gentle. "Not anymore," he said firmly. "Here, you are not chains, not property. You are free to rest." But the girl only clutched the cloak tighter, staring at the floor. Inside her chest, something sty, red, a small, fragile spark. She did not understand it yet, but it frightened her more than chains ever had. And so the night passed, her body trembling between the hard floor she knew and the soft bed she was too afraid to claim. The first morning in the human's house felt unreal to the alien girl. She woke up curled on the hard floor even though a bed waited beside her. Her body had learned too well that comfort was forbidden. Her thin arms hugged the cloak he had given, holding it like a shield. The human entered the room quietly, carrying something in his hands. A plate, steam rising from it, the smell warm and rich. She blinked in confusion, because food had never smelled like this before. Servants were given scraps, bones, or cold bread left to rot. But this was fresh, made with care. The human placed the plate on the small table and said simply, "Eat." Her body froze, her eyes wide. It had to be a test. It always was. Her old masters sometimes offered food only to punish her for touching it. Sometimes they threw scraps just to watch her scramble like an animal. So she lowered her head, whispering, I cannot, master." The human frowned, sitting across from her. "I am not your master," he said firmly, "and you will eat." His voice was calm, but not cruel, steady like stone. Still, her hands shook as she reached for the plate. Her fingers trembled, and she pulled back quickly as if it would burn her. The human noticed, and instead he lifted a piece of bread himself. He broke it in half, placed the smaller piece gently in her palm, then he ate his part in front of her, chewing slowly, showing it was safe. Her eyes followed, disbelief filling her chest. No one had ever shared food with her. No one. She stared at the bread in her hand as if it were gold. Her lips parted and slowly she took a bite. The taste was soft, warm, unlike anything she had ever known. Her throat tightened, her eyes stung. She chewed carefully, afraid it would vanish if she swallowed too quickly. The human watched her silently, not rushing, not mocking, just waiting. When she finished, he filled the plate again, sliding it closer. She shook her head, whispering, "It is too much, I cannot. I will be punished." The human leaned forward, his eyes steady. "No one will punish you here." His words sounded impossible, dangerous, yet they sank deep into her. Her empty stomach growled, betraying her fear. And when he gently pushed the plate closer, she dared to eat again. With every bite, her body loosened, her hands steadied. Tears rolled down her cheeks, hot and silent. She tried to hide them, but the human saw. He did not speak, only passed her a cloth to wipe her face. That small kindness broke something inside her. For years she had been taught to obey, to survive, but never to live. After the meal, she sat quietly, her eyes lowered. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Why? Why do you feed me?" The human leaned back in his chair, his gaze calm. "Because you are alive, and the living deserve to eat," he said simply. His words sounded strange, like a language she had never learned. Alive, deserve, words she had never believed belonged to her. Her chest ached with confusion, fear, and something else she could not name. It was not chains, it was not pain, it was warmth. She gripped the cloak tighter, her mind spinning. If this was a trick, it was the cruelest she had ever seen. But if it was real, then the world was not what she thought. That night, as she lay once more on the cold floor instead of the bed, her stomach was full for the first time in her life. Her heart was restless, torn between fear and a small, fragile hope. And in the silence of the house, she whispered to herself, "I was made to serve. But why does he treat me like more?" The days passed slowly in the human's house. Every morning he gave her food. Every evening he let her rest. He spoke to her, asked small questions, but she answered only with soft words. Most of the time she kept her head low, her eyes on the ground. She had been trained to believe silence was safer than speech, but silence also built a wall between them. One evening, after the fire was lit and shadows danced on the walls, the human sat across from her, studying her carefully. His eyes were sharp but kind, curious but never cruel. Finally, he asked, "What is your name?" The question struck her like a blade. Her hands froze, her throat tightened. She had been called many things in her life, number, servant, girl, property, but a name, she had never been given one. In her world, names were for people, not for servants. I have no name," she whispered, her voice trembling. The words felt heavy, as if they were chains all over again. The human leaned forward, frowning. "No name," he repeated, his voice quiet but filled with anger, not at her, but at the truth. He shook his head slowly. No one should live without a name. She lowered her gaze, clutching the cloak he had given her. Her heart beat fast, afraid he would laugh or mock her. Instead, he sat in silence for a moment, thinking. Then his voice softened. "If you have no name, then I will give you one." Her breath caught in her chest. A name from him sounded dangerous, impossible. Her voice cracked. "Why? Why would you do that?" The human's eyes held steady. "Because you are not a number. You are not a thing. You are alive." He thought for a long while, his hand resting against his chin. Then he said a word she had never heard before. "Leary." The sound was soft, flowing, almost like music. She tilted her head, confused. "Leary," she repeated quietly. He nodded, a small smile forming. "Yes, Leary. It is the me of a flower from my world. It grows in the coldest valleys but still blooms bright." The girl's chest tightened as the word touched her ears again. Leary. It felt strange, almost heavy, but not in a painful way. For the first time, something warm filled the emptiness inside her. It was as if she were no longer invisible, as if she had been pulled out of the shadows and shown the light. She whispered it again, slower, softer, Leary. Her lips trembled, her eyes glistened. No master had ever cared to call her anything but servant, but this human, this strange human, had given her a piece of identity, something no one could take. He leaned back, satisfied. Now when I speak to you, I will call you by your name, not a number, not a chain. Her throat ached as tears formed, but she quickly wiped them away. Showing emotion was dangerous, showing need was worse, and yet she could not stop the quiet smile that appeared on her lips. Her first smile in years, small but real. That night, when she lay once again between the hard floor and the untouched bed, she whispered the word into the dark. Leary. It was her word now, her secret, her treasure. Each time she spoke it, her heart beat a little stronger. Each time she whispered it, her chains felt a little weaker. But even as she clung to the name, fear still lingered. Why was this human so different? What did he really want from her? And what would happen if others discovered he had taken a servant and given her more than chains? The name stayed with her, echoing in her chest each time the human spoke it. Leary, he called her, not servant, not number, not property. At first, she did not answer quickly, unused to being recognized. But slowly, her ears began to rise whenever she heard the sound. It was strange, frightening, but also warm. Days passed and she began to notice things about him. Things that made no sense to her training, no sense to the rules she had always known. Masters never worked with their hands, yet she saw him carry wood, fix broken tools, clean his own space. She stood frozen the first time she saw him sweep the floor himself. In her world, such tasks were only for servants. Why would a master bend down for dirt? She tried to take the broom from him, her voice shaking. Let me, it is my duty. But he shook his head firmly. No, it is not your duty. It is simply work, and I can do it too. Her hands dropped, her mind spinning. Work, too. The word settled strangely in her thoughts, as if he was saying he and she were equal. At meals he did not demand silence. He spoke of simple things. He asked her what food she liked, though she had never been given the chance to choose before. He asked what she thought of the weather, the stars, the fire's warmth. Each time she struggled for words, afraid her answers would anger him. But he only nodded, sometimes smiling, sometimes laughing softly. It confused her more than any command. She watched him laugh one evening, the sound echoing through the house. It startled her, because laughter among masters was always cruel. But his laughter was light, filled with no sharpness. When he caught her staring, he tilted his head. Do you never laugh? Her chest tightened, and she shook her head quickly. No, laughter is not for me. The human's face softened, as if her words had hurt him. One day, he said quietly, you will laugh, Leary, and wait, and you do, it will be real. The thought frightened her more than chains. Could she ever laugh? Could she ever feel joy without fear? The rules of her past whispered no, but the warmth in his voice whispered yes. One afternoon she tried to help by cleaning the table. Her hands moved carefully, afraid she would break something. The human entered the room and saw her, and for a moment she braced for anger, but instead he said, "Thank you, that helps." Her eyes widened, her chest pounding. No master had ever thanked her, not once in her life. The words felt heavier than chains, but in a different way. They pressed into her heart and stayed there. Later, when she tried to kneel after finishing her tasks, he pulled her gently to her feet. You do not kneel here, Leary, he said firmly. Her voice shook. But I was made to serve. He met her gaze with steady eyes. No, you were made to live. Her knees trembled, her breath caught. Those words sounded too big for her, too dangerous. But deep inside, something small and fragile wanted to believe them. That night, she lay in the bed at last, too tired to resist. The blankets were soft, the pillow warm. Her body tensed at first, waiting for punishment. But none came, only silence, only safety. She whispered her name to the dark again. Leary. And for the first time, she closed her eyes without fear of being woken by pain. Yet even as sleep took her, one thought lingered. Why was this human different? Why did he not act like the others? And if he was so different, what would the world do when they found out he had taken a servant and treated her not as chains, but as human? The house was quiet that night, the fire burning low. Leary lay in the bed, her small frame hidden under the blanket. For the first time she felt her body rest, her breathing slow, her eyes closing. But peace never lasted long for one who had lived in chains. A sound outside made her ears twitch, heavy boots on the ground, voices low and sharp. She sat up quickly, fear flooding her chest. Her first thought was not of danger to him, but of herself. Her old masters had come for her. She was sure of it. No one ever let a servant stay free for long. The human moved to the door, his eyes narrowing, his body tense. When he opened it, shadows stood waiting. 3 men with cruel smiles. They carried whips at their belts, iron keys jingling at their sides. One of them laughed harshly. "You have something that belongs to us." Leary froze in the doorway, her body trembling. The men pointed at her as if she were nothing more than a tool. "That one," they said. "She's ours. Return her, and we won't cause trouble." Her throat went dry, her heart pounded. This was it, she thought, the end of the dream. The chains would return. The human stood firm, his hand resting on the doorframe. "She does not belong to you," he said, his voice calm but like steel. The men laughed, spitting on the ground. "She's a servant, a number, a body made to work. She isn't even worth the food you give her." Leary's body curled tighter, every cruel word cutting into her. It was the language she had always known, the truth she had been forced to believe. But then the human stepped forward, his eyes burning with something stronger than anger. "She is not property," he said, louder now. "She is mine, as family." The words struck her harder than any whip. Her knees went weak, her heart stuttered, her ears rang with disbelief. Family, he had called her family. The men scoffed, shaking their heads. "You've gone. Mad human keeping a servant like she's equal. Return her before we take her back by force." Their voices filled the night with threats, but he did not step aside. Instead, he shifted his stance, his shoulders square. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." Leary clutched the cloak he had given her, her hands trembling. Her whole life she had been told no one would ever fight for her, no one would bleed for her, no one would care if she lived or died. And yet here stood a human, willing to face 3 men just to keep her safe. She whispered, "Please, don't fight for me. I am not worth it." But he turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers, his voice softened just for her. "You are worth everything." Her breath caught, her chest aching with emotions she could not name. The walls she had built for years began to crack. The men drew closer, their boots striking the ground. One reached for a chain at his belt, swinging it with a cruel grin. But the human moved like fire, grabbing a wooden staff from beside the door. The clash was sudden, the night filled with shouts, metal against wood. Leary crouched low, her heart pounding, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She wanted to hide, but she could not leave him alone. Every strike echoed like thunder, every breath filled with danger. Yet the human never stepped back, never gave in. His voice cut through the chaos once more. "She is not yours. She is free." The men finally staggered, beaten back by his strength and fire. They cursed, spitting into the dirt, and retreated into the dark. But before they left, one hissed, "This isn't over, human. She will never belong to you. The world won't allow it." Then they vanished, their shadows swallowed by the night. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of Leary's trembling breath. The human lowered the staff, his chest heavy. Thung, his face bruised but unbroken. He turned to her, and she rushed forward without thinking. Her small hands gripped his sleeve, her tears falling fast. No words formed, only the sound of her crying. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her over chains. The night after the fight was heavy with silence. The human sat by the fire, his body bruised, his knuckles raw. Leary sat close, her small hands gripping the cloak he had given her. Her eyes never left him, fear and worry twisting in her chest. She had seen fights before, many times, masters beating servants, guards punishing those who disobeyed, but no one had ever fought to protect a servant, and no one had ever risked pain for her. The memory of his words replayed in her mind. "She is mine, as family, family." A word she thought she would never be allowed to touch. She tried to speak, but her voice trembled. Why did you not give me back?" she whispered. The human lifted his gaze, tired but steady. "Because you are not theirs," he answered simply. "You belong here, with me, free." Her chest ached at the sound of those words. Her whole life she had been told she was nothing. Now someone spoke as if she mattered, as if her existence carried weight. The tears came before she could stop them, falling hot against her cheeks. She quickly covered her face, ashamed. Servants were not allowed to cry unless in pain. Tears of feeling were forbidden. But the human noticed and gently reached for her hands. He pulled them away from her face, his voice soft. "Don't hide, Leary," he said. "Your tears are not shame. They are proof you are alive." The words broke her, and she wept harder, her body shaking as years of silence cracked open. He let her cry, holding her lightly, never forcing her to stop, never scolding. His warmth was steady, a shield against the ghosts of her past. When at last her tears slowed, she whispered in a voice so small it nearly vanished, "No one has ever called me family." The human smiled faintly, though his eyes carried sadness. "Then let me be the first, and not the last." The fire flickered, painting light across the walls. Leary wiped her face with the edge of his cloak, her breath shaky. But inside, something had shifted. A weight lifted. For the first time, she did not feel like property. For the first time, she felt seen. Later, when the house grew quiet and the human worked on repairing his staff, he surprised her again. He placed something small in her hands, carved from wood. A tiny figure, shaped like a flower, delicate and simple. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. "For you," he said. "I carved it today. It is a gift." Her heart thudded wildly. She had never received a gift, not once. Gifts were for people, for children of masters, never for servants. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "For me." He nodded, his voice calm. "Yes, Leary, for you." She clutched the little carving against her chest, afraid it would vanish. Her throat tightened, and without meaning to, a sound escaped her lips. A small laugh, faint and unsure, but real. The human looked up, startled at first, then smiled deeply. "There it is," he said softly. "Your laugh." Leary covered her mouth quickly, shocked by the sound she had made. But the warmth inside her grew, stronger than fear. For the first time in her life, she had cried without punishment. For the first time in her life, she had laughed without shame. That night, when she lay in the bed, the little wooden flower resting beside her pillow, she whispered the words he had given her, words she could barely believe. "Family," she breathed, her lips curling in the smallest of smiles. And though sleep took her slowly, she did not fear the morning. Because for once, tomorrow did not feel like another chain. It felt like hope. The morning after her first laugh felt heavy in a new way. Leary woke with the small wooden flower clutched close to her chest. Her eyes drifted to the fire where the human sat quietly, fixing his staff once again. The scars on his hands caught her attention, and for a moment she wondered, what pain has he carried? She rose slowly, wrapping the cloak tighter around her small frame. The air smelled of bread, warm and soft. The human turned, offering her a plate just as he had every morning. She sat carefully, still not used to being served instead of serving. They ate in silence for a while, the sound of crackling fire filling the space. Then he asked, his voice gentle, "Leary, tell me, what was your life before?" The words froze her completely, her throat closed, her chest tightening. Memories clawed at the edges of her mind, memories she had locked away to survive. She began, but her voice broke. Her hands clutched the wooden flower until her knuckles turned white. The human leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady. "You don't have to if it hurts." But deep inside, Leary felt something stir. If he called her family, if he truly meant it, then perhaps he deserved to know the truth. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "I was taken young, too young to remember my parents." Her eyes grew distant, staring into the fire. "I was raised in cages, taught to kneel before I could walk, taught to obey before I could speak." Her voice shook, but she continued. "If I spoke too loudly, I was beaten. If I rested too long, I was starved. If I ever dared to hope, I was reminded that hope was forbidden. The human's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. His silence was not cold, but burning with anger on her behalf. Leary's voice grew quieter, almost fading. They gave us numbers instead of names. We were told we were nothing but tools. And if we broke, we were replaced. A sin. Gull tear slid down her cheek, and she quickly brushed it away, ashamed. The human shook his head slowly, his voice heavy. No one should live like that. His words made her chest ache, but she shook her head, whispering, "It was normal. I was made to serve. That is what they always said." Her body trembled as she remembered nights of hunger, days of pain, years of silence. She whispered again, broken, "I was made to serve." But then his hand reached across the table, resting over hers. The warmth of his skin against her cold fingers made her flinch at first, but his voice came steady, cutting through the darkness of her past. "No, Leary, you were not made to serve. You were made to live, to laugh, to dream, to be more than what they told you." Her lips parted, her breath catching. The words felt impossible, but his eyes made them real. Her heart pounded, a battle raging inside her between the chains of her past and the light of his voice. Her tears fell freely now, but she did not hide them this time. Instead, she let him see them, let him see the weight she carried. The fire crackled as if it too was listening. For the first time, Leary had spoken her truth aloud, and for the first time, someone had listened without judgment. The wooden flower trembled in her grip, a small, fragile symbol of a future she never thought she would have. The human's hand stayed on hers until her shaking slowed, until her breathing steadied. His eyes did not leave her, as if promising silently that he would carry her weight with her. That night, as she lay in the bed, her body felt lighter even though her past still haunted her. The chains were gone, but the scars remained. Yet for the first time, she wondered if scars could heal. She whispered into the dark, "I was made to serve, but maybe now, I can be more." The days after Leary spoke of her past were quieter. The human moved with his usual calm strength, but his eyes carried more fire now. Each time he looked at her, it was as if he was silently promising never to let those chains touch her again. Leary felt it, yet fear still lingered in her chest. She had lived too long in darkness to believe the light would last. That fear came alive one night, when heavy fists pounded against the door. The sound rattled the walls, the fire flickering with the vibration. Leary froze, her breath catching, the wooden flower slipping from her trembling hands. She knew that sound. She had heard it before. It was the sound of owners returning to reclaim what they believed was theirs. The human rose, his shoulders squared, his staff leaning ready by the wall. He opened the door slowly and shadows filled the entrance. 3 of her old masters stood there, their faces cruel, their eyes sharp with greed. One smirked, spitting to the side. "We warned you, human, that she was not yours." Leary stepped back, her body pressed against the wall, her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Her voice broke into a whisper. "They've come for me." The leader raised a heavy bag of coins, the gold glinting in the firelight. "Here," he said, "take this, more than what you paid, and return her to us. She belongs with her kind, in chains." The offer hung in the air, thick and dangerous. Leary's eyes filled with tears, her body shaking. She whispered, "Please, take it. Do not fight. I am not worth your life." Her voice cracked, filled with the old training that told her she was only a tool. Never more. The human turned his head, his gaze meeting hers. He stepped closer to her, his voice steady. "Leary, listen to me. You are not chains. You are not property. You are family." Her breath broke, her knees trembling as if they might give way beneath her. The men outside said cruelly, "Family with a servant pathetic." The human's hand gripped his staff, his stance firm. "I would rather die," he said loudly, "than return her to chains." The words cut through the night like thunder. Leary gasped, her tears falling fast. No one had ever chosen her over gold, over life, over safety. But he had. Without hesitation, the masters sneered, stepping forward, their chains rattling. "Then you will die," one hissed, reaching for a blade at his belt. Leary cried out, "No," her voice breaking. "Please stop. They will kill you because of me." but the human only raised his staff higher, his body between her and them. "Stay behind me," he commanded softly. "I will not let them take you." The clash erupted, metal against wood, voices shouting. The room shook with the force of their struggle. The men struck hard, their chains snapping through the air, but the human blocked each strike, his staff splintering yet holding. Every blow echoed with the promise he had made, the choice he had taken. Leary crouched low, clutching the wooden flower tight in her hands. Tears blurred her vision, fear gripped her chest. Yet deep inside something new stirred, stronger than fear. For the first time, she felt that maybe she was worth fighting for, and maybe, just maybe, she could fight too. The men grew frustrated, their greed pushing them harder, but the human's eyes blazed with a strength they could not match. With one final strike he broke their chain, splintering it against the ground. The sound rang through the night, sharp and final. The masters staggered back, their pride wounded more than their flesh. "This isn't the end," one spat, retreating into the dark. "You cannot change what she is." The door slammed shut behind them, silence falling heavy. The human lowered his staff, breathing hard, his shoulders bruised, his hands bleeding. Leary rushed forward too, ears streaming down her face. She gripped his arm, sobbing, Why would you do this?" He looked down at her, his voice gentle despite his wounds. "Because chains will never define you again, Leary. Not while I still breathe." The house was quiet again after the fight. The broken staff leaned against the wall, the smell of blood and sweat still in the air. Leary sat on the floor beside the human, her hands gripping his sleeve. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but she could not look away from him. He had stood against everything for her, and she could not understand why. The human leaned back, breathing heavy, his body marked with bruises, yet his eyes were calm, steady, filled with a fire that had not dimmed. Leary whispered, her voice trembling, "They will come again. They will never stop." He turned his head slowly, meeting her gaze. "Then let them come," he said firmly. "I will never give you back. Not to them, not to anyone." Her heart shook inside her chest. No one had ever spoken like that for her. No one had ever promised to stand forever. She lowered her head, whispering, "I was made to serve. I am not worth this." But he lifted her chin gently, forcing her to look into his eyes. His voice was low but stronger than chains. "Leary, you were never made for chains. You were made to live." Her breath caught, tears filling her eyes again. She wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to those words, but years of pain whispered inside her, dragging her down. Her voice broke as she said, "If I am not chains, then what am I?" The human smiled faintly, bruised but unbroken. "You are family. You are free. You are Leary." The sound of her name from his lips made her chest ache with something she had no word for. Warmth spread through her, a warmth stronger than fear. Her hands trembled as she clutched his sleeve tighter. For the first time, she wanted to believe that maybe he was right. That night, when the fire burned low and silence filled the room, the human told her to rest, to sleep. She hesitated, her body torn between the bed and the floor as always, her fear. Her whispered the floor was safe. Her past warned that the bed would bring punishment, but then his voice came again, calm and steady. "Leary, the bed is yours, not the chains, not the ground, yours." Her chest rose and fell quickly, her hands trembling as she stepped toward the bed. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the soft blankets, her heart racing as if she were committing a crime. But when she looked at him, he only smiled. There was no anger, no threat, only peace. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, her body tense at first. Then slowly, her muscles loosened, her breathing steadied. For the first time, the bed did not feel like danger. It felt like home. The human sat nearby, watching until her eyes grew heavy. Before sleep took her, she whispered softly, almost afraid of the sound, "Thank you." It was the first time she had ever said those words and meant them. He nodded once, his voice gentle. "Rest, Leary. You are safe now." The night passed without chains, without fear. And when morning came, sunlight touched her face through the window. She stirred, her eyes blinking open. For the first time, she woke not to the sound of whips or cruel voices, but to peace. Her heart ached with disbelief, yet hope stirred stronger than ever before. She turned her head, finding the little wooden flower still beside her pillow. She smiled faintly, whispering, "I am Leary." The words felt solid now, no longer fragile, no longer borrowed, but her own. And as she rose to face the day, she knew the truth. She had been made to serve, but now she lived for something else. Not chains, not fear, not silence, but family, freedom, and the bed that would always remind her she was never property again.